As the war concluded in 1975, the Decatur Public School District decided to honor the community's sacrifices by naming a new elementary school on the city's east side after a fallen Vietnam War serviceman.
They put all the names in a hat, and then they called up the next of kin. But my mother, she said, okay, name the school after him, but name each room after another one. And they said they're not going to have that many rooms because too many got killed. I think he had the biggest heart of any of his kids. You know, he was the oldest, he kind of looked after us, and I think he'd get a kick out of it.
Living in a society eager to forget, Vietnam veterans now tried to move on.
We were raised in a family. We have 3 boys, and so really that consumed, the vast majority of our times. I think it was like, it's over, it's over.
Me and Gordon both worked at Borg Warner. That's where I met Gordon. They dropped these metal skids. Well, me and Gordon, we'd hit the deck. But I knew who the ringleader was. And I got him up in the locker room one day, and I picked him up by the collar and held him up against the wall. And I told him, I said, it stops now. Somebody's going to go off on you and your friends. And somebody's going to get hurt. And that's all I said. I never heard no more.
A friend of mine asked me, he said, well, how many ears did you bring back? And that was the trigger that says, don't talk about it.
Then I hung around with other veterans for a couple of years and tried to drink all the alcohol there was in the world. We had just a basic group of probably 20 or 30 guys we all hung out together in our families, wives and stuff.
Well, when I first came back, I got into the VFW because my dad was in the VFW. Mm-hmm. And they weren't real keen on Vietnam vets then. Because it was World War I and World War II was basically controlling, and the Korea guys. They weren't as accepting of us baby killers and druggies.
As a means to come to terms with their experiences, many found solace with their brothers in arms by organizing veterans groups.
I just kept quiet, kept off in the background, and until I joined the VFW.
Ron and Bob Hayes and myself and a few others did that. Named it the Smith Martin Post.
Just out at my plant, I think I got something like 15 guys from there that were non-vets. Most of them I didn't even know it. It didn't take but that long to get 25 guys that would sign up to be a charter member of the Post.
Like we have our meetings down to local 7:30 VF Post here in Decatur, and me, Ridley, and I, and Chip Chambliss, we all members down there, steadily trying to get people to come in and join up, to try to make the Post better.
I kind of enjoy being around veterans and helping veterans. That's what we all about, veteran helping veterans, And then we, like I say, we honor the dead by helping the living.
Got involved with the military or the Purple Heart. All of us have common ground because to be a member, you have to have been wounded in battle. So that's the criteria there. So we're all blood brothers.
I remember one student I had who said, I always had the feeling that I wasn't supposed to ask questions about the war, that it might insult someone. It felt like the war was some kind of dark family secret that no one wanted to talk about around the children.
I later did see where people begin to realize, what these guys do? What was that all about? Time had healed some wounds.
Much has already been written about the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C., and its place in the furrowed contours of national memory. Closer to home, veterans honored those who did not return through local memorials, music, and by visiting the Wall That Heals, a traveling replica of the wall in Washington. Mike Ferguson, the teenage Marine who lost his legs at Con Thien in 1967, now sought to commemorate Illinois' fallen.
Well, I had a real good friend named Dick Stahl. He and I went to a lot of these veterans reunions and stuff. They had an accident at one of their little carnivals. My buddy got killed off that ride. And he turned his back when the car slid off. And he took the full impact and saved his sons. Dick and I had talked about doing a memorial, but we just never, you talk about a lot of stuff, but never started. It was that time period when we decided we better get it done because we don't know when we're going to be here or how long.
Throughout the mid-1980s, Mike and Charlie Brightman, another Decatur Vietnam veteran, traveled throughout the Prairie State to campaign for the creation of the Illinois Vietnam Memorial.
Charlie was a character, all right. When we was building the Illinois Vietnam Veterans Memorial, we spent a lot of time together, trying to raise money.
As a singer-songwriter, Brightman channeled his wartime experiences into his music.
The songs about Vietnam, he always told me they just came to him naturally. He told his story, is what he did. I think it was his therapy in being able to deal with Vietnam. That was his way of doing it. Every year he would go over, before he got too sick, he would go over and he would play his song.
And that's the official song for the Illinois Vietnam Veterans Memorial that Charlie wrote and sung.
Look at all those names engraved upon that wall. Never hesitated when they heard their country call. They went to war. It was pure hell. It was there. Mike Kelly, John Smith fell.
Following in the tradition of the National Vietnam Veterans Memorial, Illinois' monument lists the deceased and missing by their individual names. The reasons for this practice are as numerous as any other historical argument. Regardless, the single name of each provides a sort of permanence to their legacy, as well as a starting place for the inquiry of memory.
Some were 29.
No one in his family knows why Thomas Fletcher, a promising graduate from Eisenhower High School, left Southern Illinois University as a sophomore to join the U.S. Army. Fletcher was killed in 1969 at the age of 21. Harold Kelly, the father of one of the soldiers mentioned in Brightman's song, relates how he said goodbye to his son.
Yeah, when I took him to Champaign, he spent the night with my brother. And my brother was a major in the Air Force, and he got him a flight down to Alabama. And that was the last time I saw him, or my brother saw him too.
They heard their country call. Went to the war. It was pure hell. It was there.
The first wall that I seen was a traveling wall.
I haven't been to the wall in Washington, but I've been to the moving wall that comes around.
I've gone and seen the mobile one. In fact, that's where I first got involved with this.
We realized that not everyone could make it to Washington, D.C., and therefore we developed the Wall That Heals. It's one of 4 traveling walls, traveling Vietnam Veterans Memorials. We pride ourselves in the fact that we are a half-scale replica of the memorial in Washington, D.C.
I don't look at names. I take it for what it is, but I don't.
Killed by bullets, some killed by landmine.
I have, but I've been to the one in D.C. a couple times.
I have too.
I hadn't seen the one in D.C., but I went to the one in Decatur, and I wasn't going to go, but I went, and I was so thrilled I did, because one of the guys that was killed, his picture was in that trailer, John Stecker, and it just brought tears to my eyes.
When they heard their country call, they went to the war. It was pure hell. It was there.
After being there for a while and looking, I had to walk away, because there's so much guilt because my name's not on there. I don't wish to be on there, but what those guys had to go through that I didn't.
With certainty, communities of all sizes in the last 40 years have begun to acknowledge the individual and ultimate sacrifices of their sons and daughters.
Some were 19 and 20, some were 29, some...
First monument ever built to show appreciation to all 3, those who died, those still in bondage, and those who returned.
Some were truck drivers, some were engineers, but most were grown slicks and sailors. The airborne knew no fear.
That's one of the best things they ever did. But I couldn't honor our vets that got killed in Decatur any better than that.
Following Iraq's 1990 invasion of Kuwait, the United States undertook the largest deployment of American forces since the Vietnam War.
The liberation of Kuwait has now entered a final phase, to eject the Iraqi army from Kuwait.
Assisted by a broad coalition of allies, Desert Storm was a concise and stunning success for the United States.
It misled the general public to think that it was all nice little push button, fly little things with a toggle stick and push a button here and everything's okay and nobody gets hurt and hell.
I was with the 477th Provisional Transportation Group. Our job was to haul diesel and JP4 up to the fueling bladders up north. In fact, our first mission was that night, but it didn't happen. The warhead fell off during flight, and it was almost a dead bullseye. There were 96 out of my unit that were critically injured, and 26 died that night. Dad, he got the phone call that I had been injured in combat. Well, he didn't do well with that at all. He was starting to have flashbacks of Vietnam and all kinds of stuff. I remember flying into Andrews Air Force Base, and they took all of us injured and they shuttled us down the coastline, and I ended up at Fort Gordon, Georgia, which is where I went on convalescent leave. So, and Dad came to get me.
Desert Storm represented a shift in world affairs and the changing of the guard. Charlie and Sean were featured on the front page of Decatur's Herald and Review. Two veterans, father and son, survivors both.
She was 9 months old before I saw her. Mike was born 9 months from the day I got discharged from the Marines. He was born.
I was next door neighbors to him. Our families were best friends, but we didn't hang around too much in high school because I went to Lakeview and he went to MacArthur.
He weighed over 200 pounds and he was about 5'11". He lettered for 4 years in football. Mike was quite a fighter. He got into a few scraps. Everybody said he was big, and they wanted to see if he was as tough as he was big. They found out. At that time, Mike was going to Milliken, and the draft kept notifying that he had moved up another notch, you know. Well, I wasn't in favor of him dodging the draft or anything because, I don't know how to say it, but I had a dentist at the time that had a son that left and went to Canada rather than to go to the draft. Sure. So I changed dentists. He was old enough to make up his own mind, and that's what he wanted to do, and he's going to finish when he got out of service again, going to finish school.
We ran into one another, and he was going to Vietnam that month. And we had a good time that night, and I didn't see him after that.
Mike started his tour on July 3rd, 1966, 8 days before his 20th birthday. He served with the 82nd Medical Detachment, a medevac helicopter unit known as a dust-off.
And we got letters back and forth all the time. He was telling about how fast they were flying just a few feet off the ground. And he says, if you look back in the tree line over there, you see the bullets coming out. I think it was Look magazine, there was an article in there on him.
The Battle of Easter Sunday, 1967, was a well-documented action in the Delta region of South Vietnam. Published a year afterwards, Kelly was mentioned by name in the Look magazine article.
I had a neighbor across the street from where we lived. She was going home from somewhere, and as she pulled up in her drive, there was an army car right behind her that pulled into my drive. And she said she knew right off the bat what it was for. So she stayed there. She stayed there with my wife for quite a while. Well, while they were there, you know. And then, of course, they called me on the phone. I was at work, and I got home right away. It was a poor trade. The medals and all that for.
Solace for Harold did, however, come from an unlikely place.
It took me a long time to come to grips with it, and then one day I was thinking, boy,
What a heroic guy this guy is. I imagine his family already knows that, though, you know. But then right around that time, computers were coming around, and you could get online, and you could check people in different cities to see if they were around, and he picked up the phone, and I said, look, I'm looking for Mike Kelly's father that was in Vietnam, and he said, oh, that was my son. Oh, you know, he died, my son died, and he was telling me like, he was telling me, you know, and I said, well, I was actually there, you know. I said, do you know about how he died? And he said, no, not really. I have, you know, the Army told me that he died, told me where he died, and he passed away. And I said, well, there's a lot more to it than that, you know. I grew up in outside of Cleveland, a suburb, Maple Heights, Ohio, just a normal family, couple of sisters. 64, I was graduating. You ended up working for General Motors, or you worked for Ford, or you worked for U.S. Steel. I worked at a gas station. I liked it. I made a lot of money. I had a nice, fast car. My mom called me on the work phone and said, Joe, the letter came, you know. You're going to go. Nothing really happened. I went out on all kinds of night missions. We never really picked up any big enemy fire or anything like that. We never came up on anything. I just liked it a lot. So I thought I'd write a letter, see if I could get out of it, mail it through my, supply sergeant, where you mailed your mail. I wrote a letter to Westmoreland. He wrote me a letter back and said, listen, we'll get you out of there. We'll get you in the helicopter company. And the 2 helicopters flew up, picked me up out of the unit, and off I went to the 175th Aviation. The Outlaw was a unit. Ours was Outlaw 17. The gunner has to make sure that all the guns, all work. We had 2 M60s. So we were a slick. We weren't a full gunship. In a nutshell, we were coming in an area that we thought was a secure area. We were told going in, we talked about suppressing the woods when we came in, maybe earlier, and they told us don't open fire on any woods. There's Americans in the woods. So we came in, we hit the ground, and we were listening to Armed Forces radio. I mean, like the Rolling Stones or something. We'd only been on the ground a few seconds, and the first thing I remember was that I had an ammo can next to my M60, and I saw the ammunition jump in the can and go back down, and my mind didn't register. Why would that do that? It took me seconds to realize why it would. And before I could even get that far, I heard all kinds of yelling and screaming on my headsets. And you forget that the screaming has to be coming from somewhere inside your own ship. And I turned and looked, and there was blood on the windshield. And, Jim Martin's son, the co-pilot, was hit in the face, and when facial wound and all that. I mean, there was blood everywhere. Same time, my pilot, John Meyer, was hit by something heavy caliber. Hit him through the leg, lower knee area, and then it started from there. We didn't have a chance. It seemed like we were sitting in a beehive. It had that kind of sound. And even though the helicopter drowns out most of the sound, you could hear things clinking, clanking all over the whole side of that thing, like it was going out of style. I didn't think I'd last another couple seconds. And because I was on the side facing it, and I was a great target, especially, knowing that even if I was in those woods, I could hit me from that distance, and I decided this is not a good place to sit. And I went through the center of the ship out. And on the other side, there was my pilot, Jim Martinson. He was bleeding pretty bad in the face. And the crew chief was trying to help him, my kid. But John Meyer wasn't there. So I looked, and John Meyer's still in his seat on the wrong side. My initial reaction was, sorry, you're on the wrong side, but I'm on the good side, and I don't know if I want to go back into the beehive part of that, And I think I just did what, any other human being would have done. I said, okay, count it down, 3, 2, we're going to go get him, and I ran around, popped the door. He popped his thing. He couldn't get out because he was stuck. The armor thing was stuck, armor plate. Finally, he got out, and he fell to the ground. I didn't realize how badly he was wounded. We went about 20 feet, something like that, and they shot me through the leg, and I fell down. We were pulling each other. We were 130 pounds. He was probably 150 pounds, and we were kind of half dragging each other, and I got shot through the leg. A medevac came in, saw us, turned. We could see him turn and see us, so we started forward again. We tried to rise up a little, and they shot me through the side, just like being on a parking lot. We're in the wide open. There is no way we can hide behind the grass. The medevac came in, got a little closer, still a pretty good distance away. I was looking at the ship. I thought, well, these guys have no, in hindsight, I say, these guys have no clue what they're coming into. This is all just raining bullets in here, raining rounds, and they don't hear it. They see two guys, but they don't really hear what's going on here. There's shots going off every half a second. You can hear a shot. When the guy from the rear of the ship spotted me, he realized then that, holy cow, all kinds of things are hitting the ship, and this is not the ideal spot to jump off and grab these two guys. And he did what probably, what he was destined to do, I guess. The real true hero thing, he just unplugged his headset, and here he comes, and he's going to get us.
Mike reached down and grabbed each one of them by the back of the shirt and was carrying one in one hand and one in the other, and loaded them on the helicopter.
And then I heard something, really close, close, like within 12 inches of me, hit really hard, and he just went down. And we were like almost on. The pilot at the time of the medevac, he said he thought he heard someone, I heard this later, he thought he heard someone say, take off, which he needed to do anyway. And we got up to about 20 feet, and they hit the pilots of the medevac. All I can remember is, like a ride in an amusement park. All of a sudden, everything went wheeling around, and then down into the ground. We kind of nosedived and cartwheeled one, and I hit really hard. When we landed, the ship kind of hit like on its nose and one of the skids, and I went up against the back of the seats. And the people that were in there, they landed on me, and my legs went over my head, and that's where I broke my back. We started crawling away. Some of the people went one direction, I went what I thought was another direction. I just wanted to get away. The VC were really dug in. There were bunkers, they would plan this in advance. There was deep bunkers. They could withstand a lot of firepower, but the Mavericks gave them a lot of firepower, and that kept them from coming out of the woods to get us. And you would think that nothing could withstand the Maverick gunships, other smaller slicks probably firing in the same area, but mostly the gunships, and F-100s dropping napalm back to back in those woods, that anything could keep shooting. And the heat calmed down, and the firing stopped. The guys in the woods would start shooting again. Incredible. One of the helicopter pilots set his ship down and unbelievably got out of the pilot's seat, leaving the helicopter running, and he ran toward myself and the other guy, and a Mac V sergeant had appeared from a unit that had been down a few miles away. Both of them grabbed me at the same time and really struggled to get me out of the mud. And later on, I talked to the pilot, and he told me that one of the other people he got out just before that was our major, who had been shot 6 times. And when he went to get him out, the major said, "Don't get me out, just leave me." He was hurt and he was shot that bad. But they did get him out, and he survived. Somebody can take away something from it that where they feel like they learned from it, or maybe some other veteran can feel like, yeah, well, we all go down that same road. We're all going to get through it, okay.
He wasn't afraid of anything. He didn't know what danger was.
Over the years, John and Annette Hensley, or Ma and Pa as they are affectionately known, have worked with veterans groups to honor the memory of their son, Jim.
We got involved with, with the ceremonies that they had, like the memorial services up here. And
got involved over at the hospital, and that gold star.
You have to show your kids, that we're going to be all right and we're going to get over this thing.
Well, he would want us to do what we're doing.
And if he had to come home, that PTSD would have been horrible for him.
Yeah, he would have been through.
Jim would have probably adapted, but I feel that we'd have watched him die slowly with that Agent Orange. We miss him terribly every day.
We didn't have to watch him suffer, though, like we did some of the rest of them.
No.
I lost my prostate from cancer, and Agent Orange, the base I was on, they dumped 1.5 million gallons on that base.
We would be out on the gun and they would spray it. You could see it. They would spray it on us as kind of like diesel fuel. And we'd take our t-shirts and wipe it off of us, but wear our t-shirts for a week. So yeah, I was around it a lot. It's affected me a little bit. The heart disease, I have a pacemaker defibrillator, and it's one of the things that Agent Orange caused, and I had bladder cancer.
We had landing zones in it. It was just flat. Everything was dead. Yeah, those were places that were easy landing zones for the helicopters.
That is the reason I talk like this. I had a heart attack. Later, I had a stroke. They tell me it was due to Agent Orange. I was in the middle of Agent Orange.
I'm a victim of it destroyed part of my heart. And again, a lot of guys, we were told at the time Agent Orange was okay, but I have no bitterness towards that.
As the last surviving Gold Star parents in the community, the Hensleys cite their faith, family, and friends as sources of support.
Trust in the Lord that he done the right thing. That's the only way you can get through it, I think.
Yeah, that is what got us through. It's our faith. And
our friends and our boys.
You never get over a thing like this, but you just learn to deal with it.
If you didn't believe in God before you went to war, you will when you get it back. What I do is why he brought me back, I honestly feel, was to tell that story.
Bob Dondeville was still just a teenager when he served as a tanker with the 11th Armored Cavalry. A lifelong artist, Bob used humor to allay the terror and morbidity of the war. Later in life, while pursuing his second career as an art teacher, Dondeville decided to focus on applying his personal Vietnam War experience to canvas. In turn, Dondeville found another one of his life's vocations.
I did my master's, that was in the painting. My master's in painting and drawing, and I said, I want to do it in sculpture. Because I went on a trip to Washington, D.C., saw the sculptures there, saw the wall, saw everything, and I said, I want to do relief sculptures.
Bob's new artistic medium serves as the center point for 2 local veterans memorials.
You look okay? Huh? You look okay? She's lost interest.
As it remains for all Vietnam veterans, Bob's time in country has left an indelible mark upon his conscience and identity. One of his most dramatic pieces concerns an act of goodwill undertaken by his unit in December of 1966.
We took them gifts at Christmas time with soap and candy. The VC found out about it, and there were 100 kids, 150 kids, something like that, and 6 nuns and a priest. And they came in and slaughtered them all about 2 or 3 days after we left. And then we found out about it at the base camp of 1st Infantry Division because the word got back to us that the orphanage was overrun by VC. But these children were killed on a Christmas day. I went down to Ace Hardware there in Charleston, picked up a gallon of oil-based red paint, went back, while I was there, got a gallon of paint thinner too, I got some paint buckets, empty paint buckets, and poured about a quarter of the paint in there, and then poured the turpentine paint thinner on in that, stirred it up so it was like watery, you know. And got up on this, went to the custodians, got a 16-foot ladder, got up on the top of it, took that bucket and just poured it on this canvas and splattered everywhere. And then it's so thin that the images of these kids came out. It just came out, gave the impact of what it does today when it's hanging. Canvases are small at the top, elongated at the bottom, and when you put them together, they depict a cross.
Seen as controversial by a few, Dondeville's artistic mission remains to help veterans cope with their own experiences.
One woman had a husband that died, and she took my hand and thanked me and left notes that thank you for giving me exposing your soul to, you know. It just, that's what, you know, that's why I'm here.
Turned the TV on, so I'm watching everything, and we knew then it wasn't an accident, you know, it was planned.
Of course, they were speculating, and I told her, I said, it's not right.
And of course, is on the TV and watching the towers fall.
Unbelievable almost, you know, you think the building can't be going down.
One of those things that you just don't think's gonna happen.
The plane that was forced down before hitting the thing, there was such courage. Oh.
Stand there in the middle of this work area, you know, and it's like, what can you do?
Made me sick to my stomach. I thought, oh man.
Nobody did anything. Everybody just stood there and watched and couldn't believe it.
You think back what our Americans did in 1941. You know what they experienced. You know, it was unexpected. You didn't think that somebody would attack your country.
You know, just like when President Kennedy got shot. You know, he ain't supposed to be shot. He's president. You know, these goons ain't supposed to be running into our skyscrapers neither. You know how they do that. You know.
My son called me. He said, "Are we at war?" I said, "We're probably going to be."
Oh shit! Right there!
On October 7th, 2001, American and NATO forces invaded Afghanistan and began the longest war in the history of the United States. The subsequent invasion of Iraq a year and a half later began a new chapter of American involvement overseas. The teenage servicemen of the Vietnam War were now playing the role of the concerned father back home.
We were out to eat one night, and I brought up that I wanted to join the Army. And me and him kind of got into it a little bit because he remembers the Army from Vietnam, and pretty much, you know, you don't want to die. You don't want to go over there and get killed, right? You know.
I don't even know if I would say that I was scared to go over there the first time. It's kind of weird thinking about it now. You just really don't know what to expect. You know, a lot of guys are like, they're kind of worried about going over there or what's going to go on over there. But I think it's more of, am I going to be able to do what I'm supposed to do more than anything? I was with a radio platoon, and again, we would be loaned out to different companies or whatever within the battalion. Pretty much what I did for them is just make sure that their communications were up and running. When I wasn't doing that, I was just one of them. I was an infantryman. I was with them on patrols and doing the same things they did.
Mike went back over, you know, a couple times. It's like, wow, I kind of know what Mom and Dad was probably thinking, you know, when I went back again, because I'm sure they thought that at the beginning, that 1 year over there, if I made it back, that would be it. And
surprisingly, a few veterans of the Vietnam War also served in the new conflicts of the 21st century.
September of 73, I think it's 73 is when I hired on with full-time for the National Guard. So I started working out at the airport as a mechanic, so I stayed there for 36 years. Yeah, and then I moved up through the ranks, ended up being the State Command Sergeant Major for State Illinois, National Guard.
I wasn't the only one. We had other Vietnam veterans that went over as guardsmen. I wasn't the only one. I wasn't an infantry soldier in Vietnam, so I can't tell you about, walking out in the booby traps and all that stuff. But you can compare that stuff kind of to the IEDs, which are everywhere. Anybody that drives a vehicle over there, has an opportunity to get hit by an IED.
Your vehicles would be moving, they'd set an IED off, an explosion, and all the vehicles would stop. And that'd be right where they wanted you to stop, so then they would set the secondaries off. We lost some guys, and knew other units that had lost several guys to IEDs over there.
We always figured if we were flying somebody, we were keeping them off the ground, so the chances are we're probably saving a lot of people's lives if we're giving them rides. So we flew a lot of people around from point A to point B. I was at Da Nang, so that was Rocket City, and then I'm at Balad, Camp Anaconda, and they called it Rocket City, so both places, yeah.
We're here to train up the Iraqi army, we're going to leave and we're going to be on this good note, and then at the end of it, it was just like, we did our best with what we could. A lot of guys were getting tired of the IA's just lack of discipline, the lack of want to make it their mission to do this. We'd go on missions with them and they'd be sleeping as soon as we got to where we were going to park, and we'd end up doing the whole mission. Our morale was more towards like, we've made it this far, let's not do anything stupid to get anybody else killed. We're 4 months away from being completely out of Iraq as the army in general, so let's not screw it up now,
When I got back here, I'd only been gone for, like a year and a half from out of school, but I was completely abandoned because everybody was gone to college, or they were married, or they were in the service. So they're just going in, starting, and I'm already done with it. And there was about 2.5 years, maybe 3 years, where I didn't really hang out with anybody my age.
To find 16 guys that got along together as much as we all did in Iraq, and to have, to make the best of, a situation that could potentially be, awful, and to come out of it going, I would go back in a heartbeat with that same group of guys, is something that's just, I've thought about a lot more, and makes me miss, those memories and being over there.
In a smaller sense, there were still, people that obviously did have their own thoughts and ideas and were not as happy about us being over there or returning home or things like that. But for the majority, I'd say that 99% of it was, completely different from what it was in Vietnam. Everybody seemed like, in a sense, that they were proud of us, and regardless of, why we were over there, they were just standing behind us as Americans and people.
We came in at Dallas from Iraq. The airport fire department's out there, and they shoot their hoses, and the plane flies through it. And the pilot comes over and says, "This is their salute to you, thank you." And so you get off the plane, and so they're looking up and they're all clapping as we're all walking in.
So I remember coming in on the bus in Decatur when we come back from Iraq, and I remember looking back to my buddy who was a Vietnam veteran, Steve Hiles, and he had tears in his eyes because he didn't get that when he came back from Vietnam.
In the years since Vietnam, I think we have this notion of heroism that basically any form of service is by definition heroic, regardless of what you do, and therefore you have this broad feeling that it's crucial for us to thank soldiers for their service, and I would say that that's a relatively easy gesture, which doesn't really have that much meaning to it. I think it would be much better if we said, "Would you please tell us about your service?" And then we could open up a dialogue that might help to bridge this tremendous gulf between the tiny portion of Americans that serve in the military and the rest of us.
Local pharmacist Ron Stevens was severely wounded in the Vietnam War. For the past several years, Ron has hiked across Illinois to raise money and public awareness for injured American servicemen.
I like to keep in communication with those young soldiers as they come back, and to let them know that, that they're going to have thoughts, and whatever those thoughts are, it's okay, whatever it is. And sometimes we know that those thoughts will turn to self-destruction. The suicide rate for Afghan and Iraq War veterans is about 7 times the national average. That is an epidemic. Doing the walk that I do, I can't impress upon you enough the emotional value I get. People just come up and they salute the flag I'm carrying. They honor it. They honor us. There's encouragement. Whatever your injuries, whatever your wounds, emotional or physical, we're here with you. Let's get through this together. Let's live our lives as we deserve, as normally as possible.
Well, I ain't no hero. Yes, I was in Vietnam. Well, now I ain't no hero, but yes, I was in Vietnam. I was a kind of a boy that write a letter home to his mom. Well, I ain't no hero, got no medals up on my chest. Well, now I ain't no hero, got no medals up on my chest. But for 19 and a half months I went and did my very best. Well, I ain't no hero, but I've been in Vietnam. Well, now I ain't no hero, but yes, I was in Vietnam.
For the Vietnam veteran, badges of a proud identity have replaced the silent stigma of decades past. Still, it is the responsibility of the general public to temper our expressions of gratitude for Vietnam veterans with an empathetic ear and a clear understanding of their experiences.
Sometimes, it's good to talk about some of the things that happened in your life that you never really had a chance to talk to anybody that experienced the same things.
I bought a pontoon boat from a guy. He had a Vietnam license plate on his motorcycle, and I said, "Vietnam?" And he goes, "Yeah." And he said, "Let me do something that nobody's ever done for you." What's that? And he stuck his hand out and said, "Welcome home."
I think if the government had been smart, they'd fear him knowing they'd bomb.
I've lived with it, the experience, and I ain't gonna say I'm glad I went through it, but I'm glad I lived through it.
Wouldn't trade them for anything and wouldn't repeat them for anything.
Well, the young people at that time, they got notified to go serve their country, and we all went and done it.
Yeah, I'm a lot of vets out here. Some were injured, lost a limb. Some have bad memories. But still, they are American veterans. They had a job to do. They did it.
Could have gone to Canada, so you'd have lived with that forever.
I don't resent anything that I've done over there. I was sent there for a reason.
Wouldn't do it again. Couldn't do it again. If I could, I would, but I can't.
All my guys made it back, had some wounded, but nobody got killed. And for that, I'm grateful. It probably is a benchmark in my life that taught me how to lead, taught me how to accomplish things, taught me that you can do anything for a year, no matter how hard it gets.
I tried to eliminate a lot of it out of my mind, like it never happened, like it was just a blur. And now, all those years later, I still recall it and remember it, and I have a lot of nightmares. My wife helps me with that. I wrote the book, Beneath the Bamboo, but my son basically wrote it. His name's Jonathan Jones, and he edited it and published it. I thought telling the story would ease the pain a little bit, but it don't.
My philosophy on life, maybe a little bit weird, but have you ever seen the old roll top desk that has all these little cubby holes? Well, all the bad things in my life are put in one of these cubby holes, and it's left there, and you don't open them up, and you don't look in the closet, you don't look under the bed, because you don't know, may not like what you find.
There's survivor's guilt. There's just anguish from the death of someone dying in your arms, dying next to you, and just the fact of killing the enemy. And we think, that's a natural thing to do. It's not.
Opinions about the Vietnam War from the veterans themselves are as diverse as the population at large. Too often seen as a loaded gun of Hollywood cliches, the Vietnam War remains a conflict tainted by politics and unachieved objectives.
The idea of American exceptionalism is really deep in our history and really in our bones. This idea that above all nations, we are essentially superior. So one of the things that, to my mind, is so dramatic and historic about the Vietnam War, I argue, is that more than any other event in our history, it fundamentally challenged this idea of American exceptionalism. One might say that other events could have done that as well. For various reasons, it was really only, I think, in the 60s that broad numbers, millions of Americans, for the first time, began to challenge this idea that we were sort of inherently superior.
Number one, I was just glad to get out of there. Tet Offensive was really heating up, and I wasn't so sure about our cause. I sure as heck didn't want to be killed or maimed because of it.
I'm proud to serve my country in Vietnam. I think I did a very good job, but we shouldn't have been there. Got us to a win.
It was so political that they were never going to let us win the war. We could have walked across Vietnam with all the troops we had over there. We could have walked across from one side to the other.
I'm going to be buried in a cemetery somewhere, and then there's going to be a plaque on there that says I'm a Vietnam veteran. I can just almost guarantee it. As I look at veterans out of World War II or Civil War or any one of those wars prior, you say they did a job and they got it done. They sacrificed a lot and were much better off for what they did. You can't say that.
I thought we could do some good for them when we went over there, but when I come back, I realized we couldn't. The place we shouldn't have been, I don't think. It's too bad because it had 58,000 people lost because of it.
Across the Potomac River from Washington, D.C. is the consecrated ground of Arlington National Cemetery, with its eternal devotion and sacred ceremony. It is here that Decatur's Vietnam story is still being written. Alan Boyer and Doug Hagen were best friends who graduated from MacArthur High School in 1964. The two were regarded by their classmates as inseparable. Boyer joined the Army Special Forces and in 1968 went missing during a mission in Laos. As a means to find his lost friend, Doug too joined the same Green Beret unit. During an enemy ambush in 1971, Doug was killed while carrying out feats that would make him a posthumous recipient of the Medal of Honor. Upon the discovery and return of Alan's remains in 2016, it was decided that he should be laid to rest next to his best friend in this pantheon of American heroes. In the smaller temples of devotion across the United States, the progress of a man or a nation is best understood through the rhythms of each changing generation and the legacy each leaves behind. This artwork is directed at 3 groups: fellow comrades who, like me, returned from Vietnam, those whose lives were touched by the loss of a loved one, and finally, young people who have not yet experienced the horrors of war.
To the first group, I want to reach out an empathetic hand. They are not alone. To the families who are no longer whole, I remind them of the courage and honor earned by their sons, daughters, husbands, and fathers. Because we, the Vietnam veterans, have never had a lasting peace. Young people need to know that they too are vulnerable.
I remember well that morning, my boy called on the phone. Said, Dad, you better turn on the TV. There's something bad going on. As I sat there in that silent room, not believing that I saw those towers fall, I thought of Mother Freedom. In the distance, I heard Old Glory call. As the firemen raised a flag that day, Ground Zero marked the spot where all America came together with every prayer and every thought.